we are living in an artificially induced state of consciousness that resembles sleep. The poor and the underclass are growing. Racial justice and human rights are non-existent. We have been lulled into a trance. They have made us indifferent to ourselves, to others. We are focused only on our own gain. That is their primary method of survival. Keep us asleep, keep us selfish, keep us sedated.
You're listening to Toward Anarchy on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Here's your host, Michael Storm.
Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me. It's true what the digital voice says. It is Toward Anarchy. I am Michael Storm, and it is another beautiful day here in the sort of literal middle of America. It's the heartland of America. I can prove it because just down the street from me, the track that they put in some number of years ago, it was to, I think they did it initially to race NASCAR pickups. Remember NASCAR pickup racing? That was a thing for a while. It seems like back when I was in college, so it's been a long time. But they built a racetrack for that and other stuff out here, and it's called Heartland Park. I could prove it. I'm right here in the heartland of America, talking to you from Topeka, Kansas, and of course, producer Sam is running things for the network. He has all the controls in hand there in Texas for the network, and it's just this wonderful mesh, this coming together. I just love this whole thing. I love doing this every weekend because there's so much involved in it, even though it's such a really simple thing, seemingly. There's a lot involved in it, and there's a lot of people to thank for it that don't get thanked for it because they just are doing their thing, and it's what they do, and they do it because they love liberty and they love the truth messages. They want to hear what independent thinkers and other people have to say. They want to hear a voice outside of the mainstream media. Without question, there's a clamoring. It's obvious in the youth. It's not so obvious in the older adults, maybe necessarily. I guess it's because it's what's pop, it's what's hip, and older adults just aren't. They're not supposed to be, I guess. It's really obvious in the younger generations because they find their information in other places. If you ask them about what was on the nightly news, most of them aren't going to be able to tell you what Channel 5 said, but they'll be able to tell you, what they picked up across the social media and through the different places that they, YouTube, everywhere that they manage to find their information. I'm I can speak to it as being a positive thing myself because I haven't watched sort of Channel 5. There's no Channel 5 here. I don't know. It's just a random number. I'm just talking about regular television. It's ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox. I watch some of their programs, but I watch them, and I have been for many, many years, well after they air, a week later sometimes, or considerably longer at other times. But I don't watch any of their news, and I don't see the CNN and the Fox. And I see their headlines and I know what they're talking about, but I don't actually watch or listen to it. Again, it's that thing about, I hear about a topic and I turn and I'm interested in it. I turn my attention to it. I go find out about it. I don't wait for somebody to feed me. But we've had this. The last few weeks, there's a couple of things. I have to grab my phone here, and I'll have to dig around on my desktop. Money, guns, drugs, all the things I need to clear out of the way so I can get to the other stuff on my desk. The last few weeks, I've shared some articles with you, and I'll talk about it. But the last few weeks, there's been this push, the vaccine thing. It's been there for so long now, it's almost old hat. You kind of almost forget about it. But there's just a couple of things that I had noticed and it's through this mainstream media, these normal sources of media, that this nonsense is shared and pushed. Let's see. I captured the image of the one, and I'll give you the headline. This was just yesterday. Where did you go? There you are. And it's about the vaccine reactions. And I shared a thing about it last week about the total number of vaccine reactions and how the CDC seems to be just sort of blowing it off. They're not really concerned about it. And the pattern continues as the U.S. officials, this is a quote, this is KSNT, this is a local news station, the Peacock, whichever one that one is. U.S. officials, anxiety drove vaccine reactions in 5 states. And this is about the study in and around some of these blood clots and some of this other stuff, and in these pockets where people have had adverse reactions, apparently. And this the idea is that what they're claiming is that the reason that people are having the majority of reaction to it is because of their attitude towards it, and the mental state and the anxiety that is brought on. But they even tell you it's a small percentage of people, and then that's so it must be a percentage of those people that have that. That's what you start wondering about this, but. And you could try to dig and try to find numbers and question and put yourself in a proper place all along. But I can tell you, just from, they say U.S. officials, people get so freaked out by the injections that their anxiety spurs a physical reaction. That's the claim. And I see that claim. This is me just reading the headline. I actually have read this story, but I just read the headline initially and made up my mind about it. I knew what this was. It's a whitewash of the real problem. This exists anytime we get into this conversation about vaccines. I had it again yesterday. The business that I own, the comic book shop that I own, a couple of my partners have had the vaccine, and one of them got the vaccine. They say they're doing it for other people, whatever their reasons are. That's fine. It's their thing. It's whatever it is. But when they ask me, or their wife doesn't get it, or he doesn't want the vaccine, and is coming up with excuse after excuse, and then I just stop and I say, look, here's some real numbers. One of my business partners, he received the vaccine from a place that I do business with, work not for but in, and with somebody that I actually hired years ago. This was an employee of mine some number of years ago who is a pharmacist, and he's into magic and board games and stuff like that, and so I hired him to handle my Magic the Gathering when I ran the store here in Topeka years ago, different store. And to have him back in the store, it was just kind of funny because he gave him the shot. He's a current employee again now because he's come back to work for the store again after running into him again. There's so much more story in there. But at any rate, all these interesting people bouncing in and off of each other as we sort of pinball around the world and do our thing, come back together again and end up getting their vaccine. And so the conversation comes up, and they never go to the core questions. Nobody ever really questions that base claim of the vaccine efficacy. It's always one reason or one excuse or another not to take it or to take it, and it's all very superficial in the reasoning behind it. And I just beg these people over and over again, like I say, it happened again yesterday, to actually think about it and to actually just take a minute and look at the curve of disease, and I've asked you to do this before, and I've shown the charts, and it's enough to make you look at the surface information without having to dig too deep. If you just get the basic concept of what you're looking at, is that vaccines come along so much further down in relation to disease presence within the population that there's almost no evidence that they actually work. They're always introduced sort of 80%. Things are a little bit different with what's going on with COVID-19 and the vaccines that are being released now, because we're still in the middle of it. Usually these things have been around for a while. COVID-19 supposedly is new. Supposedly it's different. Oh boy, don't even get me started on looking at those numbers again. This is what I'm talking about in this idea of what these central news sources will float at you. It's so superficial, and if you don't have any critical understanding of the information that you're reading or that you're being told, in most cases, most people are being told, they're not even bothering to read anything. That's the worst problem with the social media. The biggest problem with the social media and the so-called news that gets shared across social media is that short form, that quick. It's not just that you have limited space to do it in, because obviously if you click on the button, you go to the website, you get the whole story. But people don't do that. They're looking through Facebook, they're reading headlines, they're catching memes and 240 character statements, and they're not investing a lot in it. And this is the majority of people, especially if they have other things that distract them and that they just don't have any interest in this. It's very, very frustrating to watch, because what's happening is, and this is, I shared this link with you. If you go to towardanarchy.com, let's get some of these basic things out of the way as I'm talking about this. Go to towardanarchy.com. Right on the front page, if you're with me live, you just click on May 2nd, and it'll take you to the page. And as always, I shared some links and some information about my guests who are coming up in just a couple of minutes. I think they're already waiting on the phone for me. They'll be coming up in just a few minutes as I finish talking about the rest of this stuff, when we get through a couple commercial breaks that are short and coming up here. I shared this meme for you. If you have to go there, click on the archive. I've been in there working a little bit lately and making sure that it's nice and clean and making sure my links read right and are going to the right places. And so it's nice and clean in there right now. It's real easy to find what I'm talking about. You're looking for May 2nd, live with me or not. May 2nd is the magical day in my universe. And if you scroll down on that page, you'll see I grabbed this screen image of these other images of stories that have been headlines that have hit over the last few years about vaccines. It's been a big conversation. If you don't pay attention to it, you've missed it. I know that I'm talking to a lot of people who do, so you haven't missed it. But you may not have caught every subtle little bit, and you may not be at that same point that I am, which you may never get there in that understanding or that belief of what this all really means for the world. But this image that I captured and I shared up there, I don't know where it comes from, but it's a collage of different headlines, just a few of them. It's not like you spend weeks reading this. COVID-19 cure. Scientists plan to develop self-spreading coronavirus vaccine. Coronavirus cure. Scientists plan bizarre, quote, self-spreading vaccine to fight pandemic. Scientists are working on vaccines that spread like a disease. What could possibly go wrong? That was, here's the one that was back from 2017. Vaccines of the future could be as contagious as a virus. And that one was from Popular Science and Kate Bagley. It's just that they're toying with things that they don't understand, obviously, because it's still really very new, especially this particular the coronavirus vaccines. It's still very, very new in our understanding of that entire technology and that rewriting of our own genetic code and what that might have or could do in the long term. We have no concept of that. We're only barely admitting that there could have been problems with vaccines in the past. That's where we are as a society. That there might have been. That I get this one all the time about thimerosal and other adjuvants in the vaccines, and the conversation about them, and the autism claim, and that's that. Well, they took that stuff out of them. Well, no, they didn't. Not if you go and look. That's not the answer. They took it out of this one. They took it out of that one. They said that maybe this is too much and that too much. That's too much, but they didn't. It's not gone. It's still one of the adjuvants that's used. It's still a mishmash, a mix, an amalgamation, a guesswork of chemicals and other crap that they just throw together and hope that it tricks your immune system into creating a response. And there's just, I'll say it again, and you have to go look. This is not me being crazy. This is me just looking at, having spent a lot of time looking at some of the base claims of vaccinations, and then just looking at the surface claims of them. The surface claims of them are false. That everyone will get it, whatever it is, if you don't get vaccinated, and you will die. Furthermore, that if you get vaccinated, that the reason you didn't get it, whatever it was, is because you were vaccinated. There's actually literally no proof that either of those things is true. Neither of those things is an absolute. And if you, it's unfortunate that I can't dwell on this subject too much. I've given it already way too much time here, but it's just been on my mind, and it's all around me. And the fact that they're trying to push this thing, and we're talking about vaccine passports, and this is a huge thing, and it's something that myself and other people have been talking about as going to happen for many, many years. That this is what would happen, that you would be forced in one way or another to get vaccinated to participate in certain aspects of life, and that most of those would be centered around public access, and that as public access becomes more and more controlled by the state and run by the manipulators and the controllers and the people who make money off of the narratives, the lies, by the time it gets down to us, the science, the questions, you as an individual, you better know who you are and why it is you are getting the cure, whatever the cure is, because, man, there is a whole history of mandated and accepted thought of so-called science in the medical industry that has been completely turned up on its ear, and it's all been money driven. It's all, there's somebody somewhere was making money, and the concerns were not that great. Because one of the big things with all of these drugs, with these vaccines, the pills, whatever it is that no matter what the test is, it's still only this small in comparison to the larger number of people that are out here and the variance of each of those individuals. It's such a dishonest approach. It should be such an individual thing. All our health care should be, but we're so removed from our hospitals and our insurance, and it's because of that third-party interference, that government, that federal central system. And I have to shut up about it, not just because we're going into a break, but because I need to tell you about what's coming up. Michael Howell and Melissa Hansbarger are coming up on the show. We're going to talk about End the Fed. We're going to talk about Fighting the Tyranny, and we will do that in just a few minutes.
You're listening to Toward Anarchy with Michael Storm.
Okay, I don't want to beat a dead horse. It's always painted such a weird image in my mind. Beat a dead horse. Okay, yeah. But the vaccine thing is big. It's huge. You need to be paying attention to it because it's going to have huge implications as the state encroaches more on your health and more on the public sector and the ability to move about freely within the public. This is all a long-running conversation talked about by crazy people like myself and Alex Jones and many, many others. A lot of people have ignored it and haven't paid attention to it. Oh, that it's not going to be that way. This is America. It's different. Colorado sees rapid spread of cases among middle and high school students. You know why? Because they just went back to school, and now all of a sudden they're being tested again. It's a new population. They already had it. They were already. They've been trying to push the fear button on this thing again, and it hasn't worked real well. They have India right now is the big push, except that some of the pictures that I've seen have been fake. Some of the information that I have seen is fake, and it's fake news. What are you going to do? The reason I said that is because there was another one of these headlines, and I'm just going to take just this couple of minutes and before this next quick break, and we bring our guests in, and just hit some of these headlines because bringing up Alex Jones there was a couple other things that I wanted to mention. There's news stories and some things that pop up, and these are just things that I see as I'm going through my day and working. I busted my hump this last week. I actually put in sort of 10-hour days and a full week's worth of work. That's not something I do too often. I try to avoid it, in fact. UFO fragments are likely in Lockheed Martin's possession, says ex-Senator Harry Reid. I've been talking about disclosure and what's coming up. It was Danny Panzella. He's been a guest on the show. He's the one that had shared that meme that I have at towardanarchy.com. If you look for May 2nd and scroll down to the bottom of the page there, you'll see that collection of those headlines that I read about the scientist planning the self-spreading coronavirus vaccine. Let's see. This is great. I don't know why I caught this, but it just struck me as funny. Conor McGregor bought the Dublin pub where he assaulted a man and then banned the assault victim. And that's anarchy, brother. That is as hardcore, whatever it is. I'm not going to place any judgment on the fight or what brought that about because I don't know the details. All I know is that's some brass ones, man. Just, you know what? Here's what I'm going to do. I didn't like you in my club. I'm really going to actually own the club. And then you can't come in no more. I don't know. It struck me as great. Okay, so speaking of Alex Jones, and everybody says, oh, he's crazy. And I don't think that's the case. I think he may have gone crazy over the years, but I don't think necessarily like totally loopy and lost his mind. A lot of what he's talked about has been absolutely 100% true over the years. Hype and presentation and all of that aside, there's a lot of truth in a lot of the things that he's talked about and presented to people over the years, and he's for what it's worth, woke a lot of people up. Scientists alarmed by lab-grown human-animal hybrids, something that people like George Norrie and Alex Jones and Art Bell, even before both of them, were talking about years ago. And that the headline about the UFO fragments in Lockheed Martin's possession, Senator Harry Reid saying that, and scientists alarmed by the lab-grown human-animal hybrids. Go back and listen to last week's show, my conversation with Dr. Joy. That conversation is peppered with the ideas that are contained within those couple of headlines right there. Chemicals in plastic and electronics are lowering fertility in men and women. Gay frogs, anybody remember that? The big joke about, oh, Alex Jones says the chemicals are turning the frogs gay. Yeah, it wasn't that simple, people, and that's that more dishonest conversation and dismissal of real, potentially life-altering information, especially if you're not paying attention. That's PBS covering that. Let's see. Demand for water is rapidly increasing as supply dwindles. These are just some of the things that I came across that, wow, what a world we live in. Pandemic, pollution, disposal masks and gloves are saving lives but ruining the environment. Love that one. Let's see. COVID vaccine appears to be safe during pregnancy. Appears to be. Again, small trial. No matter how big trial, small trial. Big trial, all of you suckers out there getting the vaccine now, you're the big trial. My guests, Michael Howell and Melissa Hansbarger, are coming up next, and the Fed is a conversation, fighting the tyranny. That's what they do, and we will have that conversation next.
You're listening to Toward Anarchy with Michael Storm.
Okay, I have to remember that I am not 13 years old and sitting in my bedroom with my headphones on, listening to Pink Floyd, and that was going to end, and that we must go on with the show. I was just really enjoying that. I live here in Topeka, and in Kansas. There's very limited access to new music in the public domain, in the on the public airwaves, and just listening to the radio. And because of my job and the fact that I have to go so many places at any given time, I'm listening to the radio a lot, and I'm just flipping through it, and I'll hear Pink Floyd, but it'll be, it'll be, I can't, comfortably numb. That's like the only thing that ever gets played. There's no dark side music. There's nothing. There's nothing from Animals or anything. Don't even get me started on that. Go to towardanarchy.com. I need you to do this. I need you to like, share, follow, subscribe, whatever platform you're on, wherever you've seen the link, wherever you're hearing the show. If it's YouTube, whether you found us on Float or MeWe, or on Minds, or on Facebook, if you're still there on Facebook and Twitter, we're there. That's the way we win this thing. That's how I fight the tyranny. If you go to towardanarchy.com and you look for May 2nd, you'll see Michael Howell. He's an author. He's an End the Fed activist. He's a returning guest to the show, of course. He's been on a couple of times, and he's become a good friend of myself and the show, and he just has a wonderful message. And as the couple of years or so have gone by that we've been doing this thing, he's on his own show, and he's writing the books, and he's just putting out all this work, and he's got a co-conspirator now, Melissa Hansbarger, and so both of them have joined me, and we're going to have this conversation about ending the Fed, because we'll talk about a bunch of different things, but I know that Michael is one of the few people that I trust to have this conversation with, because he gets it. I say that a lot, and it's almost a dismissal of any further conversation, and you know how much I don't like that, but it just is that simple. When a person gets it, they get it. You can add these things up. He wrote a book, and he's writing more books about it as he learns and it goes through the experience. Up there at towardanarchy.com under May 2nd, if you look, there's links there. You can follow Michael and Melissa as they fight the tyranny, and we'll talk about Fight the Tyranny as well by visiting the Fight the Tyranny homepage. There, the link is there. It's if you're not looking at the link, it's fightthetyranny.wordpress.com. That's the blog and the stories, and just a great way to stay connected with what Michael and Melissa are doing these days. And also, you can support Michael and catch it. You really get an in-depth idea of what is going through his mind and what he's thinking about and his understanding of the world by picking up a copy of Anatomy of a Global Agenda, his first book on his dissection of the globalist banker world domination agenda. And it really is. That's what it is. And so it's great to be able to have friends like this, to have these conversations with, let alone actually convince them in a short period of time to come and visit and do it here in the live presentation. So I really appreciate you, Michael and Melissa, for joining me. It's great to get to talk to you both again.
Oh, thank you for having us.
Yeah, you bet. Anytime, my friend. Melissa, are you there? Are you connected?
I'm here. Hello.
Hey, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm all right. I guess you guys were listening to the first part of the show. You can see what's on my mind. It's just oh boy.
And that's
Go ahead.
on our mind too. That's something that we talk about on Fighting the Tyranny as well. I mean, I loved your intro. I loved everything that you said, and I agree with you 100%. If you remember last time you had me on, I apologize to your audience because you had Adam Kokesh on, and then you had McAfee on. You had some heavy hitters on, then you had me on. So I brought Melissa this time, so I wouldn't have to apologize to your audience. So.
Oh no, not at all. You know what? You can hear from Adam Kokesh anytime. You can hear from well, I don't know that you get to hear from John McAfee so much anymore because they finally caught up with him and locked him in a cage. But I mean, he's still out there. His voice is still out there. Those guys are easy to hear from. I really appreciate being able to provide a voice to the people that I know, the real people out here doing a work like yours and taking the time. I have such respect for people who will write a book. I don't care if it's self-published, published through a publishing. I don't. Whatever the circumstances are, you get credit just from me. Just for making the effort, because it's a huge undertaking to expose yourself in such a way and to take the things that you claim and state that and put them down on a piece of paper and make them available to the world. Because they stand the chance of being scrutinized and demonized, and there's just so much that goes into I think putting in the written word. It's different us having a conversation like this. We can be normal and natural and say things and not be exact and perfect and right. But boy, you start writing it down. So I really appreciate being able to give someone like yourself and Melissa a voice. You do great things, and I really appreciate that you do it, and that you do it. You're like me. You do it because you want to do it.
Absolutely. I mean, you have to love freedom. You have to love liberty, and you have to ask yourself, what's at the root of liberty and freedom? Why do we love it so much? Well, at the root of it is self-responsibility, the right to live my life however I want to see fit. Well, what irritated me is, first of all, in ninth grade was the last year that I took civics. After ninth grade, they removed civics from school and started putting in social studies and American history and all this other watered-down history. So over generations, I started seeing a dumbing down to the political system and how it worked. By this time, I'm working in mainstream media. I'm a writer in mainstream media at this time. And it started irritating me that nobody understood, first of all, the government, how it worked, and then the supposed constitutionalists, or the Constitution. Now, I'll make a disclaimer here. At this point, I'm a libertarian. I'm, in the system. So I want to work within the Constitution. So it started irritating me that in my job in mainstream media, I would bring in stories, and I wasn't allowed to say them. I would have all my sources. I would have quotes. I would have all of that in perfect order, and I wasn't able to write about it. And so that started rubbing me the wrong way, so I got out of that. And so I went into policy writing, and I was a policy writer. And I worked with senators, representatives, and anyone else you could think of. And I was spinning my wheels there. It doesn't really matter. People think that there's a two-party system fighting each other, but really what it is a two-party system fighting you. And they're on the same team. And it wouldn't matter that the policy that I was writing would deregulate something or would lower taxes and increase revenue through less spending. It wouldn't matter the benefits of the policy that I was writing. It would get rejected. And a more draconian one would be requested, or they would not go with us and go with another policy writing company because there's. But anyway, you understand what I'm saying. Yeah. So I started getting frustrated with that. I'm like, what the hell is going on? I mean, we've got soldiers dying, and I come from a military family, and I was in the military, and all of this. and we talk about rights, and we talk about this, but when it comes time to show economic benefits, liberty benefits, freedom benefits, revenue benefits, debt spending benefits to these politicians, they simply just do not care. And the reason I found over time was because I couldn't compete with a corporate lobbyist. Now, I wasn't a lobbyist. I was a policy writer. And I know we're splitting hairs here, but I was, at this time, 100% Constitution, 100% freedom. You know, I could not be bought, and still to this day can't. And Fighting the Tyranny brand has been approached, but that's another story. So I started getting frustrated. I'm like, you know, how can we do this? So I removed myself from mainstream writing and policy writing, and I started Fighting the Tyranny. I started Fighting the Tyranny in probably 2014, probably 2015, seriously. And it started off as radio. And I had a radio show, and I did radio for a few years, and had a website where I would write my articles at and all that. And some things happened, and I got out of radio, and I started it back. And when I started it back, Melissa was my producer. And I'd had some guests lined up, and one week I didn't, so I had her on because she has a brand called Homesteading on a Prayer to be my guest.
Okay.
So she is now the producer and co-host of Fighting the Tyranny. I'm very thankful to have her help with Fighting the Tyranny. But what we do is we center around economics. You know, we're big in the feathers, and we know at the root of all the stuff, we can fight vaccines, chemtrails, geoengineering, all that, and we should. That's very important that we do. But at the root of all that is economics. They're doing this for greed. With the greed comes the power. You know, they don't want the money. They've got more money than their great-great-great-great-grandchildren will ever spend. What they want is the power that comes along with the money. So the money is the tool to gain the power. And the politicians is the tool to right away through legislation our freedom. So what we do at Fighting the Tyranny is we fight any form of tyranny that there is. We are not any party, Republican, Libertarian, Democrat. You know, we use liberty, freedom, and self-responsibility as our baseline. And that's a little bit about the brand or about our show or anything, but just a little bit about us.
No, I appreciate that's great because I mean we need to work that into the conversation so people know exactly where you're coming from and what you're doing. Melissa, tell me, give me that same kind of spiel. Where you know what, how you end up being the producer. You know, I didn't know any of that story, and now I got Michael's side of it. Let's where are you coming from, and what brings you to want to even fight the tyranny? Isn't it just easier to? I mean. Man, ignorance is bliss, isn't it?
Right. Well, to answer your first question, Michael just asked me if I would produce. I'm very new to radio. This is all new for me. So I was like, okay, I'll try it out, you know. So I guess I did okay because then he asked me to co-host, and that was a bigger issue for me because I'm not real comfortable with all of that. But I'm getting there. I've done a few shows with him. So I'm working through it, and I'm actually excited to do it. And I'm glad that he asked me.
Yeah, no, that's great because I think what happens is a lot of times, I think someone like yourself, you might be one of these perfect examples of this where you may not have known that there was a place for you in something like this, and it may just turn out to be the best place you could possibly be, as long as you think that your voice is being heard and you're saying and doing the things that feel right by you. I guess that's all we have to gauge by anymore, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm not a writer, so I'm giving radio a go. I've been an activist for years, and that's how I met Michael, and I'm glad we've gotten together to be able to do this. However we can get the word out and make people aware of what's really going on, I'll try it.
The real way that she got to Fighting the Tyranny radio is I have a face for radio. She has a voice for radio and television, so she adds a lot. But seriously, she's doing great. She was a great producer, and she's even a better co-host. But she has a brand called Homesteading on a Prayer, and I want to encourage everyone to go to Facebook and don't only follow the page, but like the page. I'll let her talk about it, but tell them about Homesteading on a Prayer.
Please.
Well, like I said, I've been an activist for years, and I was always real big on, getting that information out there and try to make people aware so we can help fight this. Through the years, I've noticed I'm kind of just, it's fallen on, I'm talking to the same people that are like us, so it's not really getting out there, and nothing's changing, and nothing's going to change in Washington. I don't see anyone ending the Fed anytime soon. You don't see a lot of people talking about it. So I wanted to focus somewhere else. Okay. Preparing for hard times. We're at hard times, and they're going to get harder. So I decided I wanted to start something with that. And I've been a prepper for years in the prepper community, but I wanted to go a little different with that into the homesteading and teaching self-responsibility and self-reliability, self-sufficient. So I'm starting a blog, the Homesteading on a Prayer, and what I'll be giving information on how to homestead, different ways to homestead. So I do have the Facebook pages as well, and I'll be starting my blog here this week.
That's fantastic. That's great. And so that also gives you something by default to bring into the conversation, is that background in the prepping. I mean, and just in doing. I think it's something that is seriously lacking, is just people really doing. There's a lot of people that are saying this is the way things should be done. There's just not as many just really doing it, and that's what I like about bringing these conversations. It's weird to have somebody talking about doing things as opposed to doing them, but that's the difference between having these conversations, like you said. Everybody's having that and the Fed conversation. Everybody's having this conversation, that conversation out there. Let's find the conversations that people aren't having enough of and that people are looking for. And we will continue this conversation when we get back here on Toward Anarchy.
You're listening to Toward Anarchy with Michael Storm.
So I took a chance during the time during the break to add a quick link to the page. So if you go to towardanarchy.com, and as always, please like, share, follow, subscribe, whatever platform you're on, wherever you're finding these links, wherever you're hearing our voices, share it and be sure to follow along. And I added a link there to be able to follow the Homesteading on a Prayer page on Facebook. And Melissa, she shares her experiences as a prepper and grows this blog that she's working on. So that link is there as well now under May 2nd if you go to towardanarchy.com. So the question is, this is a short little break here, but we'll sort of preface the upcoming half hour and suggest that, as it has been to me, that the Fed it's just a meme. It's just another emotional reaction to the state of things, and that there's no real benefit in it, and so that's why people don't pay attention to it, and it's just sort of blown off like that. I think I don't believe that. I'm of a mind that the Federal Reserve, the control of the money, the manipulation of the markets that is managed by the bankers that manage the Federal Reserve. I think it's fairly obvious the damage that it has done and the power bases that is allowed to build up and ultimately to protect itself from its theft. Those bankers in this cartel. And it's one thing for me to talk about it, but it's another for me to have Michael Howell and Melissa Hansbarger to come in and have this conversation about the Fed, because Michael spent years studying it, and he's been in and out of the both the media side of it and the political side of it talking about these things and presenting ideas and watch them ignore the good ideas in favor of the bad ideas, and it always traces back to the money, doesn't it?
It does. It's money is the tool. I mean, and really, we propped up money. Money's nothing other than a means of exchange. You know, you got something I want, then we enter into a means of exchange using money, or currency, rather. But we elevated it, and greed took over. So they saw that, and they are using, and this is centuries. I'm not talking about recent times. We'll get to 1913 and the Federal Reserve, but over time, this New World Order or the Illuminati, or whatever fictitious name you want to put on them, they've been using the currency and the economic systems as a way of getting the power and the control that they want. So I always say that the currency is the tool to get the power so that they can get the national sovereignty. You got to get rid of individual sovereignty, national sovereignty, and that's what we're seeing. It's so hard to sum up, and I know this is a short segment for you, but it's so hard to sum up globalism.
That's all right. That's a good start. We're headed into it, and using the word globalism, that's a good thing because it's at the heart of it. A lot of it is. We will continue the conversation with Michael Howell and Melissa Hansbarger. We're talking about End the Fed. They are fighting the tyranny. We'll do that here on Toward Anarchy. So we are off into hour number 2. If you go to towardanarchy.com and you look for May 2nd, you can follow along as always. Michael Howell and Melissa Hansbarger are my guests, and we are talking about End the Fed. Just before we went into the break there at the top of the hour, Michael gave just a quick breakdown of what the Federal Reserve is and sort of hit on some key words in there, separating currency and our means of exchange from the actual control mechanism. It's not to say, that is to say that money is not evil, that it's those who are using the money and controlling the money that are evil and exercising their will over the people and doing so through this power structure that they've built by controlling the monetary system. And it's something that, again, Michael broke the ice on that. It's been going on for a lot longer than just since 1913. I mean, you would look at 1913, and I'll have Michael tell us about that. You could look at that and go, that's just the culmination of years and years of effort to do similar things, both here in America and before that overseas and other places in the world. And the bankers have been more successful here and there in other places than they have. And America is one of these bastions of freedom that exists, even though our currency, our money, is centrally controlled, and it holds our entire nation prisoner. What happened in 1913, Michael?
Oh, 1913, a lot happened. Well, 1913 gave us the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, obviously, but it gave us the IRS and it gave us the taxing system that we operate under now. And all the way up to this point, America had 2 central banks prior in its history, from 1776 to 1913, and both operated on a 20-year charter. The first one being called the First Bank of the United States, and the second one being Second Bank of the United States. Not original titles, I know, but what I liked about that, if you look at history, not taught history, but real history, you look at the debates of the time, and you really study, you put yourself in the times. The people of that time knew that central bank was inflating the economy with artificial inflation, and they were devaluing the dollar. And also at the time, both of those central banks had more, they were also acted as private banks, meant that they could take consumer deposits as well. So both of those banks grew in power, and the people at the time saw that. So when the 20-year charter ran out, also the politicians wasn't as bought as they are now. So you had some politicians of both of those eras too fighting against it, such as Thomas Jefferson and Andrew and others. But the people, It was the people response to the central banks that ended those 20-year charters by putting the pressure on the politicians of the time. So I say all that because people today don't understand, first of all, money. They don't understand how it operates, worth, value, what's it backed by, artificial inflation, just your basic economics. I'm not talking about your economic degree holders. I'm just talking about your people. Everyday people don't understand how the economy works. That's why Henry Ford said if the American people understood how the economy works, there'd be a riot in the morning. And he's right. We're sitting here burning neighborhoods and all that for injustice. And don't get me wrong, I hate the police state more than anybody, I promise you. But this is something that we could all unite around and build our neighborhoods instead of burning them down in despite of each other. If we all really understood the economic and the purchasing power and the devaluing of the dollar and the artificial inflation that we have, we would be so united that no New World Order, no Illuminati, no elite, no shadow government could ever tear us apart.
Ever.
So that's the vision that I want people to understand. Get out of the two-party system. They don't care about you. I can tell you from back rooms. I can tell you from hotel rooms, from bars, from conference tables. They don't care about you, all right? Stop burning down your neighborhoods. Let's rally behind our economic system. We're not poor because we're not hard workers. We're not poor because we don't know how to spend money. Some of us may have that problem, but in general, as a society, as a country, we're not in debt because of the people. We're in debt because of central bankers. We don't understand economics because politicians removed that from our education systems, and the think tanks took over our education system through the Rockefeller Foundation and others. So we need to, you always hear people say at the local level, at the community level, and they're right. That is where the change is going to happen. But first you have to understand what you're fighting. And whether you're on Antifa side, Proud Boys side, or all these other silly groups out there, you're being played. You're being played to get the division that they need so that they can write more legislation. I can't tell you the dollar amounts that people get in kickbacks to take away your freedom. And they know that they're taking away theirs as they're writing the policy, but they don't care because they're getting kickbacks or getting benefits. So that's my rant for the day. Sorry, but I will. Out of that rant, the only thing I want people to understand is please understand several things. First of all, the difference between money and currency, the difference between worth and value, and understand the basics of economics. And you'll see that all of this is fictitious. You'll see that all of this, whether we're talking about COVID, whether we're talking about vaccines, whether we're talking about chemtrails, whatever, GMO, you'll see it's all for profit for corporations so that they can continue to get more money, to pay their lobbyists more money so that the lobbyists can pay the politician more money to take your freedoms from you.
That's the long version of it. That is well, the problem with it is what happens is that I think people start to hear a lot of words, and they start to hear depreciation and investment and this. It's just all these buzzwords and things, and they get confused. They miss the basic idea of just being able to control your own wealth, regardless of what form it is in, being the primary decision maker of that wealth, and not being robbed in the creation of it or the sharing of that wealth by an uninvited third party. And that should be simple enough to get most people to pay attention. Now, just dig a little bit deeper, and you start to see exactly what we're talking about here, and that's this manipulation of things. Michael, you mentioned the public school system a little bit there, and a couple other things along the way, and it all ties in together. And I think that I don't know if there's straight lines, but I bet if you start to chart it out, there's some pretty great correlative lines between the education system, the manipulations within it, changes from civics studies and home economic studies, what they would have been sort of 50 years ago versus what they might be today. I think that there's a great correlation there, because I think one of the things it's done is the simple management of the household has been turned into this. It's a little bit of a game. I mean, almost everything kind of is anymore, it seems like. But it's been turned into this little game of you just have to win. You have to have the most toys, and it's not. There's no sense brought into the understanding of the money or what it really means or what it can do for you. And I watch. One of the things I see happen so often, because I'm addicted. I go to the gas station all the time, and there's always every single time somebody poorly dressed with limited resources buying lottery tickets over and over again. I see the same people over and over again buying lottery tickets and just throwing their money away on it. And it's this complete lack of understanding of the value, what limited value they have in the dollars that they have and how they spend them versus the return that they're going to get on them. And I think it's all indicative of the manipulation of the education system in general and across the board. And it ends up coming back to that conversation again and again, because if you look at our education system, we're talking about this Prussian idea of control and manipulation of the information that is allowed to be taught to people, and it's within a statist, within keeping the society, the status quo going.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at when the federal government's main policies started interfering with our education system, it was in the 60s. But if you look at the start of that, in the mid-50s to late 50s, a lot of the think tanks, secret societies as we call them, think tanks and secret societies were already working on that plan. And that's the thing that I've noticed with policy and legislation. When you hear about it, they've been working on it for years. Another perfect example that will tie us into what we're talking about currently is the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. That act, or that legislation, happened in 1910 off the coast of Georgia on an island called Jekyll Island. And that was led by Senator Aldrich, and then some heads of J.P. Morgan and the World Bank and all the heads of banking and financial institutions. So these are written out. The plan to take over our education system was done in the 50s. It was planned in the 50s, but it was implemented in the 60s through Lyndon Johnson and Nixon and others taking draconian legislation and intervention in our public systems. But it's so layered and it's so multifold how we got here. I mean, it's the entertainment industry. It's not understanding individualism versus collectivism. And here's an interesting topic. I don't know if you want to dive down this or if you want to go
wherever you want to go, brother. You take us there.
People look at individualism and isolationism as a bad thing. And it doesn't mean that I don't care about charity. It doesn't mean that I'm going to stick my nose in the air whenever I walk by somebody who's down on their luck or needs, medical help or whatever. That's not what individualism is. Another example of individualism is a paramedic can't enter a scene to help the wounded until the scene is secure, because the paramedic can't help anyone if the paramedic's dead. That's what individualism is it gives us the opportunity to take care of ourselves first so that we can strengthen ourselves, so that we have the extra revenue, the extra food to pass along to charitable things. And so what they're doing through the economic system is we call it destroying the middle class, but it's actually deeper than that. They're destroying the economic purchasing power, devaluing of the dollar, and they're doing that several ways. First of all, they're doing it through artificial inflation. But the popular thing that, because people don't want to understand artificial inflation and how that works. So another way that they're coupled with artificial inflation is they're doing it through taxes. Well, anyone familiar with the Communist Manifesto knows that the very first of Karl Marx's 10 planks is to institute a gradual tax system. So the bankers are robbing us daily through inflation. The politicians are robbing us through the gradual tax system to get to this socialist, communist utopia that they have. So what individualism does is we don't need taxes or we want to provide for ourselves. We want to grow our own gardens. And by doing that, by taking self-responsibility and self-sustainability, I'm going to have extra tomatoes. I'm going to have extra chickens. A perfect example of this is our homestead here. Melissa's done a wonderful job here. We have chickens. We give our eggs away, and Melissa's looking into selling the eggs. So, and we also are getting ready for our summer garden and things like that. So we're going to have extra food so that we can be charitable or we can compete with a free market with. So that's what individualism is. It's not snobby, and it's not, well, I say all that because our foreign policy, we need to have more of an isolationist policy and get out of all these countries, because we're being led by the United Nations. We're being led by the banking cartel. And people who keep hearing wars are banker wars and they roll their eyes, get past the cliche of that, the motto. It's 100% factual. All these wars are for banker greed and profit, you know?
Absolutely,
So,
because they're either, well, they're about taking resources and taking land and things like that. And no matter what, there's banks behind them all. But go ahead, finish what you're saying.
Exactly. Yeah, and if we were truly liberating a country, then why didn't we give them, the citizens, all guns and say, you need a Second Amendment, go write this in immediately. We're not going to be here for 10 years doing this. You need to take your country back. First of all, we never should have went over there, but you know what I mean? We had our 1776. We need to let these other countries have their 1776 and create the country that these people want, not that these world leaders want. So we can stop all, we can at least slow down all this by understanding our economic policies, by being self-sustainable. And I'm not saying everybody have a garden or whatever, but if you live a life where you can't grow a garden, then buy from a local gardener and help that gardener out if you can't be the gardener. You know, if you go to Walmart and do all your shopping or whatever, and your neighbor sells eggs, then don't buy your eggs while you're there, and help your local people out and understand your economy. Your dollar goes further with your neighbor than it does with Walmart, than it does with all these big corporations. So the best way that we can maximize our dollar is by being charitable with each other or supporting through our others' business endeavors. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it really boils down to that. And I would like people to understand the importance of it, because there's a lot of the topics and things that we have come across this show and that are anti-participation in some of these political systems. But I don't ever want that to be cause to dismiss the real fundamental impact an individual can have on their community by participating. That includes by showing up at the polls and voting locally and things like that. But it's about that community level. It's about the people within the community deciding what's best for the community, not just, let alone third-party political interests, but how about fourth, fifth, sixth, other nation, other planet, other dimension, whatever. All of these manipulations and opinions about how the individual, you use the word a bunch of times, should be managing themselves instead of just letting individuals manage themselves, as we generally do. That anarchy notion in there.
Yep. Imagine 320 million Americans practicing individualism. You know what you wouldn't need? Charity. You wouldn't need this. So I know it's a philosophy, it's a political philosophy, but it is inaccurate. It is a way that we're going to get this turned around, because right now all we're doing is passing on unpayable debt to our great-great-great-grandchildren. People don't understand how money gets into existence, or how money is created. And what happens is the Treasury Department and the Federal Reserve enter into what's called a bonds for cash swap.
Oh, wait,
So
hold that
America
thought. Hold that thought. We got going into this break, and we'll come back, and you'll tell us how money comes into creation. And we'll wrap up the conversation here with Michael Howell and Melissa Hansbarger. We'll have to have you back, Melissa, just to talk about the homesteading on a prayer. We have to set that up. We'll be back right here on Toward Anarchy.
You're listening to Toward Anarchy with Michael Storm.
TowardAnarchy.com. That's the best way to follow along. If you're there, look for May 2nd, and you'll see we've been talking with Michael Howell and Melissa Hansbarger. We've been talking about End the Fed and their show Fighting the Tyranny that they produce, and we have all the links for you if you just go to TowardAnarchy.com. Look for May 2nd. You can follow them by visiting the Fighting the Tyranny homepage. It's fightingthetyranny.wordpress.com, and then of course there's links up there for the Homesteading on a Prayer page on Facebook, as well as a way to get to see Michael's book and buy that book, Anatomy of a Global Agenda. Just his first delving into of this whole thing that we've been talking about here, and it really is a global agenda. But there's a key element to it, and he started to get into it just before we went into the break. And that's that people don't understand what money is or how it's created. So finish telling us quick how money is created and why it's problematic in what we're talking about, what people understand as money, these dollar bills that we shuffle around.
I know that you have a well-educated audience, so I'm not trying to demean them, but if you don't know what we're talking about or some of these terms, a good starting point is understanding the difference between Austrian economics and Keynesian economics, and understanding that the American economic system operates in Keynesian style or format or whatever you want to call it. But going back to my original point, how money gets into circulation is the Treasury is nothing more than a signature on a loan application. America, through the Department of Treasury, enters into a bonds for cash swap with the Federal Reserve, which is a private bank. So say America needed $10 million. We'll use easy math. What they would do is they would go and print $10 million worth of bonds, and the Federal Reserve would go and print $10 million worth of cash. They would enter into a bonds for cash swap. Excuse me. They would enter into a bonds for cash swap. And from there, America would get the money, and it would go to a few top banks, and from there would get this is the trickle-down part of money entering into the economy. And then from there, you have fractional reserve lending and a whole other set of Ponzi scheme. But two things I want people to understand about the economy is how money gets into circulation, and the fact that whether the national debt was $30 trillion, which we're approaching, or $1, it's mathematically impossible to pay off. And let me explain that, because people are saying, well, if the national debt was $1, we'd pay it off. It's mathematically impossible, and the reason being is when America loans money or borrows money from the Federal Reserve, we get the principal amount, but there's still interest attached to it. So the very first time that $1 rolled off the printing press, there was interest attached to it. Now, the Federal Reserve doesn't take anything but Federal Reserve notes for payment. They don't accept gold. They don't accept Bitcoin. They don't accept anything. You can't barter with them. They only accept Federal Reserve notes for payment. And that's how they get it out of currency and all of that. So, say the national debt was $1, or let me say it this way: say every American agreed to empty their piggy banks and everything and give every single penny back to the Federal Reserve and say, you know what, we're done with you. Federal Reserve is going to look at us and say, okay, where's our interest at? Now, keep in mind, there's no more money in circulation because we just handed it back to the Federal Reserve. So where does the money to pay the interest come from?
Thank you for putting it that way, because that's a very good way of actually explaining it to people. I think they miss it when you just tell them that money is a debt instrument, that you owe more money than you will ever print. That's a better way of putting it, the way you just said it.
Yeah, people get hung up in the debt number. But I just showed you an example how it could be.
Doesn't matter.
Don't even put a number to it. You know, just let's just agree to give every single penny back. And in this scenario, say every single person agreed to it, 100%. Piggy banks, couches were emptied, car ashtrays. You know, we looked everywhere, and every single penny, down to the penny, was given back to them. You still got the interest on the debt, which is mathematically impossible. Because here's another thing, and now I'm getting over people's heads and understand that, but derivatives. We always talk about how the national debt is $28 trillion or whatever it is, and that's true. But once you add derivatives in there, the most brilliant economists out there can't even put a number to the debt. They say that the world debt is $220 trillion. They said once you add derivatives in there, the number's so astronomical, it's fictitious. You know?
Well, and that's the thing, is who is it owed to? We don't owe it to the planet. So that somebody somewhere is owed that money, but there's not anybody that's owed that money that's starving, that isn't going without a meal tonight.
I think there was a transfer of ownership. I think God sold it to the Rothschilds somewhere in the 1770s or something. I'd have to check the article on that, but I believe God sold it to the Rothschilds. If not, the Rothschilds believe that. So.
Oh, my. That was a great way to wrap it up. Couldn't have said it better at all. Michael, wonderful talking to you. Melissa, it was great getting to meet you. I'd love to have you back on sometime to talk about the homesteading. It's wonderful getting the chance to talk with both. Thank you so much.
You're listening to Toward Anarchy with Michael Storm.
All these years later of doing this radio thing and living in a literal sense from minute to minute during that time, and much of it much longer than just 2 hours on a Sunday each week, it just still amazes me how much information, good information, you can really squeeze into a very short period of time. And it's sort of less than an hour of conversation that we had about the Federal Reserve really hit on all the major points for anybody who needs to hear them and needs a jumping off point, needs somewhere to go and start looking. And of course, this audience is sharp. And so immediately I started getting feedback as we're having the conversation. And, of course, the first thing that pops up is the creature from Jekyll Island. And thankfully, somebody didn't just mention it. Chris, we know Chris, not his real name, not their real name. Sorry, don't want to go through all that gender and no. Chris, my imaginary friend, doesn't exist. He's not real. He is. You can contact him. He's on the Skype with me here. Send me a message and was actual link to a PDF version of the Creature from Jekyll Island. And now that was mentioned, Jekyll Island. That's this little spot where this meeting occurred in 1913 between these barons and bankers, and where they cooked up the scheme for the Federal Reserve and instituted it and really put it before Congress and made America's third bank. And made it an open-ended charter. They didn't put an ending to it. That was one of the things. There was this myth that ran around for a while. I don't remember when it finally ended. It wasn't that long ago, but that it finally ended. I guess 2013. Duh. It was 100 years. Supposedly, and that the charter would expire in 100 years, but that's not true. It was an act of Congress, and it will take an act of Congress to end the Federal Reserve. But the great thing was being able to actually manage to get to all of the minor points of the story of the Federal Reserve in there, and exactly what it is and what it does in that short amount of time. But if you want to take that longer conversation, of course, there's Michael Howell's book. I give you the link there, towardanarchy.com. Look for May 2nd, the link there for his book, Anatomy of a Global Agenda. That's just one of the topics in there. It's really the larger view. It's one of, I believe it's a trilogy of books that he's about to release a second. We didn't talk about it at all, so I'm unfortunately a little bit dumb of the information that's there. But he'll be back, and Melissa will be back, and I'll have Melissa back, and we'll talk about the homesteading on a prayer. It was really. I didn't know that was her thing. It's one of the things about knowing these people virtually. A lot of the people that I bring onto the show, almost all of them, except for obviously my father and friends and people like that who've been on the show, people that I actually know physically exist, been in their presence, and some of these people I haven't, many of them that I haven't, and I don't know who they are, and I don't pretend to, and that's why I bring them here to talk about it, and unfortunately bringing Melissa in to have her talk about that and try to talk about and the Fed and all the other stuff at the same time was never going to happen. So I'm glad that we had the introduction. That was the point of having her on with Michael this time, was for me to get that introduction, because I've been on Fighting the Tyranny, and she's been on the show too, but we didn't interact. We didn't have any chance to interact with each other, so I wanted to get a chance to meet her and find out who she was and what she does, and now I know, and she'll be back on the show, hopefully, and we'll talk about homesteading on a prayer. But those links are up there, including Anatomy of a Global Agenda, to be able to buy that book. But then if you really want to do the research specifically on the Fed and what it is, and the research has been done. G. Edward Griffin wrote The Creature from Jekyll Island, and it's that's 600 pages or something like that. I would share the PDF, but I don't think that you legally can. It's one thing about it being hosted and shared in a archive and places like, which I'll share that archive link with you next week. I'll make it a point to do that. I took it down. But it's another for me to actually take that and distribute it. I said that'd be something different. I'm not going to do that. So I'll give you the link to it if you want to do that research. It's more than I'm interested in. G. Edward Griffin he spent years studying it, and there's a lot to it, and he's trying to create the foundation for that understanding of what the Federal Reserve is and how it was created, versus what I'm on the other end trying to do, is just try to show people exactly what the Federal Reserve does. How it, that's the important part for me. The rest I leave to the individual to go find out. You want to find out some more about that, and I've had this conversation with you before, where I'll have a real-world conversation. Not all of this stuff is imagined in my head. A real-world conversation with somebody about the Federal Reserve, and not Michael Howell, not one of these Ron Paul type people who actually has a understanding of the Federal Reserve, but just somebody who thinks they understand what the Federal Reserve is, because it has the federal word in it, and it's a reserve, and it's a bank, and supposedly the president makes the decisions by placing the head of it, and all these little things that they might understand about the Federal Reserve. What they don't understand about the Federal Reserve is what it actually does with our money, and it's at the core of it. It's a printing of it, and that's why I was glad that Michael got to that point, really to wrap up the conversation and to leave it with that, because the creation of the money is the fraud. That in and of itself is the fraud. That fact that it's a debt instrument, that fact that you will never print enough to create it. Couple that with the fact that the government can print its own money. That's a whole other conversation. The Constitution allows the government to mint its own coinage, to pay for its own debts, so that we're not responsible for it. Then there's also the conversation of, why are we, the people, forced to use federal money? We're not out here, and it's discouraged that we use other means to exchange with each other. And what happens is that people, they don't think about it. They don't realize that exchanging Bitcoin or comic books or whatever it is just it's right here on the edge of anarchy, of doing things without that centralized control, without using those dollar bills. There's ways to avoid the inflation. You can't avoid the taxation. That's illegal. If you're in the wrong tax position in life or bracket and you don't pay them, then that's illegal. But it's not illegal to avoid the interest and the destruction of the dollar by putting it in other currencies and exchanging it. And that's why these currency, I try to explain this to comic book guys, and you've been witness to the show over the past year and through COVID and everything that I've talked about in my own involvement, becoming owner of this new comic book store, something that I've done before, and investing again in the comic book industry. And it was a good thing that I did at the time, because it's booming, it's exploding, and the reason it is because of this move. Whether people understand it or not, they end up following trends of what other people are doing. Whether it's to their benefit or not doesn't matter, and whether they realize it or not, it doesn't matter. But what people are ultimately doing is getting out of the dollar. They're changing their dollars into other things, because those other things will still be worth something to someone regardless of whether the dollar exists or not. So holding dollars it's never been a good idea, because of the fact that it's a debt instrument, and it's so important. I love the way that Michael Howell put that. Just simply saying, and I have to remember this is why I'm repeating it. I have to remember this so that I can continue to use this in conversation, because I never thought to put it so simply. I try to explain to somebody what a debt instrument is, and how that affects the existing population of the dollars, without getting into all this economic M1, M2, all that silly nonsense. It's math. They have to remember this simple idea. Take every single penny under the couch. I love how he went under the couches and in the ashtrays of cars and stuff. And as he's saying that, I'm picturing every penny I've ever sucked up in a vacuum cleaner. It's just all of these pennies floating all around the world. But you take every single one of these theoretically and give them all back to the bankers, the Federal Reserve, and we still owe the interest, no matter what. Every single one of those dollars printed off is printed at debt, and you can never print enough to do. That's why the government was supposed to be able to mint its own money. It was supposed to be based on its own ability to produce any wealth at all, because government doesn't produce wealth. So it had to find means to do that, or ways to settle its own contracts with itself. It was never supposed to be this big. It wasn't supposed to be a wealth transfer system. That's not what the people wanted out of America. Maybe that's what the founders wanted. There's some that argue that it was all a settlement, that it was all just a compromise, that we all still are subject to the crown, and all of these different theories about who rules the world. Please stop for a second. This was what I was getting into in this real-world conversation about the Federal Reserve, is the person will say, well, who is the head of the Federal Reserve? You can't answer that question, then you have no business talking about the Federal Reserve. And where my argument is if you don't know what the Federal Reserve does, regardless of who the head of it is, who they pretend is running the system and making and calling the shots, then you are the one who doesn't know about the Federal Reserve. That's this dishonest approach to trying to have a conversation about something and making it about the non-point. I'm concerned here in all of these matters about the functional reality. I'm not concerned about the New World Order, who the New World Order is. I'm concerned about what they're doing. I'm concerned about what they're using their power and their control for. Those are the things that's what Melissa hit on earlier in the conversation, in finding that fighting these battles and having these arguments was not as productive in her mind. Maybe some find it that way. Some do, some don't. Maybe it works for you. For her, it wasn't working. And I don't think it works for most people. I don't think it works for anybody who's honest with himself, because it's just kicking around the idea it's not the functional work of things. If you haven't noticed, I love that word now. That's my word, functional, because it speaks about what something is actually doing, what it's producing, and that's something that is missed in the conversation so often. Again, the dishonest conversation, the get back to the basics of why these things exist, where they come from, whether it's our democracy or whether it's our banking system or whether it's our public school system or vaccines, whatever that. You know, I have to do this. Just have to, because I have these things on my phone, and the only way I ever really can delete them is if I've got them out of my head. I've pushed them out of my head. Federal inspectors fear more vaccines were exposed to contamination. Nummy. An unvaccinated worker set off an outbreak at a U.S. nursing home where most residents were immunized. What's the point then? If it's true, they're immunized, they're protected, right? Let's see, what else was in here? Biden calls on Congress to pass police reform bill. That's a joke. I've told you before where that's all headed. We're headed for federalized police. That's the end goal before we ever get to police accountability or any of that nonsense. They're going to get a little taste of it here and there, but before we get there, they will nationalize the police. That's what's going to happen. Mark my words on it. Let's see. New way to pay at Whole Foods. You can scan your palm. Loving that one. Police officer fired after allegedly donating to Kyle Rittenhouse's legal fund. That's I hate it, man. So much for free speech. That's where free speech actually is a thing. That guy employed, but I don't cop. You know, I have no love of him. Come on. He has the right to support whoever he wants to support, and that includes politically, socially, whatever. And it certainly isn't a reasonable basis for firing someone. It is definitely the type of thing that so-called free speech, that right, is meant to protect. And I hope he sues the hell out of them. Let's see. North Carolina Walgreens accidentally administered saline instead of COVID-19 vaccines. I haven't even told you the numbers here lately. I don't even know anymore. Chile has one of the world's best vaccination rates. COVID is surging there anyway. That's a CNBC. Let's see. Kansas governor, no interest in COVID-19 vaccine passports. Well, that's nice. She's otherwise still a Nazi. We must start planning for a permanent pandemic. That's Bloomberg saying that. That's them telling you that you will submit to government and you will lock down on the scientific technological takeover when they say you will. Canada's largest province says it's in a third wave, and officials worry that one might be a little old. The vaccine rollout may not happen fast enough. AstraZeneca may have used outdated information on vaccines. Yeah, so that's a couple weeks back, a few weeks back on those. So good. I'll be able to delete those. But it brings me to this one again, and this is that historical death rate, and it shows the years on this one from 2008 to 2021, and it's 0.96. 0.96 is 2008, and 2020 was 1.1, 2019 1.1, 2018 1.2, 2017 1.2. Where's COVID? We'll be back.
You're listening to Toward Anarchy with Michael Storm.
TowardAnarchy.com, as always, that is the place to follow along. Please like, share, follow, subscribe. Take the few seconds that it takes to do that, to make sure that happens, because that's how this information wins. That's how good ideas get planted and grow. Is you. I'm here digging the dirt and planting the seed. I need you to help water that sucker and make that tree grow, and it's real simple to do. I know it takes thinking about it though, because I know I do it myself. I have to consciously stop and say I'm not just reading this and enjoying this and passing it by, or hearing this and enjoying it and passing it by, I'm making sure to actively let them know that I like what they've shared with me, and that I'm willing to share it again. Like, share, follow, subscribe, whatever platform you're on. Just a couple of things to talk about. I just love the whole vaccine thing, but it's funny because Chris, not the real name again, I just happened to mention that Lucifer runs a system, and there's this new, I don't know how new it is, but on Hulu there's this Skinwalker Ranch investigation. This guy bought Skinwalker Ranch here a few years back, and he's paid these people to come out and do a real sort of thorough investigation, magnetic readings and radiological readings and just everything around it. And I've just watched a couple of episodes of it, but this guy, he's a billionaire. He's a rich guy. He's a big guy. He's one of them. He's a they, in that capital THEY sense. He's them. And he names one of his search tools, one of his major technological search tools that they've created, Satan. He uses the acronym Satan, and they keep showing him in these backgrounds. I haven't in these conversations. I assume it's in a room or office in his home or one of his buildings, something like that. That it's his space. And in the background of it, there's a bunch of stuff, but the one thing that my eye immediately shot to, especially after he mentioned the Satan thing, after he pointed out that his little device that they had created together, that he had named it Satan, I said, well, red flag right there for me, because it doesn't matter if I believe it or not. They believe it. Okay, let's get that out of the way. But in the background, every time they sort of call him on Zoom or whatever it is, whatever video conference call that they end up having with the guy, he's in this space where in the background of him, there's one particular object that tells me that it's not a game for him, that this Satan thing is not just something that he came up with. Oh, it was funny, it was cute. He has the Hellraiser cube in the background. That, I mean, it doesn't matter whether you believe what they believe it. I'll be back next week. You take care.